In terms of camera lenses, a shot like this would cost you thousands, whereas a shot like this would cost you a few hundred.
Could you tell which of those shots on that beginning sequence, which I haven't filmed yet, so I don't even know, were done on an expensive lens and which ones were done on a cheap lens? In here, I've got a lens with a cheaper build quality than the box it came in, whilst in here, I've got a lens which you could literally use for a deposit on a house. You actually could. That's no disrespect to any company that make the budget lenses. I think it's brilliant that they cater for all budget types. Not everyone is going to take their lens on 3-month Arctic excursions or treks into the Sahara Desert where you need the build quality and weather sealing from something like this. I just want to see if the image quality from something like this is comparable. I've actually got a mix of expensive and cheap lenses in the boot. I'll put them up on the screen here because I can't be bothered to list them all off. It's not going to be a scientific test because normally in those scenarios you would take all the same settings on each camera and this lens and then compare the footage, and obviously the expensive one's going to win, but in a real world scenario you're going to use all the tools available to you to get the best possible image. So that leads me to the camera. At the moment I'm filming on the C400 Mark III. Now I can't use this one because it doesn't have the RF mount, but in the boot I've got the C400 and that also has the triple base ISO. Will that level the playing field against the higher end expensive lenses? I'm going to go and do this in the centre of London because that's where, you know, all the cool shots are. I'd like to say don't take it too seriously either, because although I'm going to make it as fair as possible, I will compare the same focal lengths, but the way I get to those focal lengths could be different. It might be a zoom on one lens and then a prime on another. So this probably wasn't what you were expecting to see when I said I was going to go into the centre of London and get a shot. That's because I've stopped at the service station because there's a lot of traffic up ahead anyway, so I thought I'd kill some time and get a shot of some trees. I've moved away from the service station. I did try to do it over there, but there's so many people, and the moment you pull out an expensive camera, everybody wants to stop and talk about it. But you know, it's fine, but when you're trying to do something, it does delay you quite a bit. So I've moved away at the moment. I can appreciate that not everyone has the same use case scenario as me. I tend to make feature films, and that's mostly all I do, so I tend to favour a softer look. And some of my most favourite shots I've ever had in my films have come from the cheaper lenses. You know, with a cheaper lens, it's usually lighter, and so that makes it much easier to mount onto a gimbal or a Steadicam, and you can get like much smoother shots. So now I'm going to switch over to the other lens. So it should be looking sharper, I think, more clinical. And the cinema lens should have looked more graceful. I'm going to take a look on my tablet just here, load it up and then have a quick comparison just myself, and then we will take a deeper look into the quality comparison between the lenses a bit later on in the video. But for now, I need to get to London if I'm going to get some shots in daylight before the sun goes down. Well, that looks like a win for the cheap lens there. Even on my tablet, I couldn't really see much of a difference, but then again, they weren't really pushed to their limits in that scenario. I'm going to do that later on when the sun goes down. So between now and then, I'm going to intercut this video with some drone shots because that's what people do, which I'll be filming on this thing. On this next test, I did record myself talking, but there was so much noise from the traffic, not even 32-bit float could save me. So I'm just going to talk over it now as I'm going over the footage, and there's a good chance to actually inspect it properly as well. So put the clips up on the screen, and here's one, and then here is the other one. I won't say which is which. Can you tell? Is there a big difference? Is there anything that stands out that makes one look a lot cheaper than the other? Let's just ignore the changes in the clouds for a moment. And if we take a look at the railings, I can also see a lot of purple fringing on the spikes. Both lenses have it, but it's a lot more prominent on the cheaper lens, while the expensive RF lens seems to have less than half the amount of purple fringing, and it's more of a red colour than purple. So there's a difference. Again, I have, this is zoomed in a lot. And lastly, I noticed that despite the lenses being f4, there's more separation between the spikes and the background on the expensive lens. Now let's see how it handles skin tones. Apparently I'm incapable of standing in the same place twice, but this is what we've got. I'm seeing more magenta in the RF lens, while there's a bit more green in the budget lens. And a bit more contrast in the budget lens as well, I'd say. If we now swap to some shots I took on the bridge, these shots are almost identical, that they are indistinguishable to my eye on this screen right now. I can hardly see a difference. And then if we go to a shot I took just near the gates to the park, ignore the blooming. I mean, this is an unfair test really, because the sun is blooming on one of the shots, giving it a nicer look to it. So yeah, if the sun was in the same position, I think this would be extremely difficult to tell them apart as well. I always forget just how wide the 20mm actually is. The camera's literally only like 1.5 meters from me. Look how wide that is on full frame. I'm used to Super 35. Just to be clear, I'm only looking at the image quality. I'm not looking at the functionality of the lens, like the autofocus. You can probably hear it now, like it's hunting for me because it's an older EF Sigma lens. So I'm not going to be looking at that. And now we're on the RF. So was it a big jump? I was as fast as I could possibly be. We've lost a little bit of light, and I just realized this one only goes down to 2.8, and the other one I had set at 2.5. So, but then I did say that I was going to get the best that each of them could handle in any scenario. So I think it's still fair. The highlight roll-off is like looking a bit better. I know that's a lot to do with the sensor, but how does the transition go from like the light area out here over to the dark area? It got dark really quickly, but it gives me a good chance to compare these two lenses, which is what I really wanted to do from the beginning. This is what I was most interested in, because I use this one a lot, which is the pretty cheap 70 to 300mm f4, 4.6, something like that, against this one, which is the 70 to 200 2.8, and it's the the high-end quality glass that Canon make. We're going on the LCD screen. It looked pretty good. I'll see properly when I get it up on the computer screen, but the shot does look really good. In real life, it's actually pitch black right now, so I've put the ISO right up, and so let's swap it over. Yeah, I don't think I've ever been so wrong about a lens. This is night and day. I mean, this is usable. Let me try and put the ISO up and see if that changes anything. We're already at 3200, so let's put it up to the next base ISO, which is 12,800. It might be too bright now that it's at 12,800, but I can always bring it down in post. Okay, so we'll just have a deeper look at what we just saw, and I was startled quite a bit at first at the difference between the exposure first, but when I adjusted the base ISO, it did seem to level the playing field quite a bit. So if we punch right in, I'll put it up on screen, we can see a lot of noise on both, but the cheaper lens does have more because of that higher ISO. It is a fair, they're both really good images. I'd be happy with the cheaper lens. It will need a bit of denoising. I mean, don't forget, these lenses are very far apart in price. The cheaper one is literally 10 times cheaper. That's not an exaggeration. So
Would you be willing to settle for the cheaper lens, that slight reduction in image quality to save 10 times the money? If we look at some shots I took behind me at the skate park, which was quite well lit, these are very close. There is a slight colour difference. I think maybe the cheaper one is, again, slightly more magenta, and it did hold focus when tracking the skateboarders a bit better, and I think that's because that it's a deeper depth of field. A more expensive lens was losing the skateboarder when tracking quite a bit. Yeah, so we go back to Big Ben. There's less detail around the clock tower. And then just for fun, here is what it looked like on my phone. This is, well, you should know what building this is. This is the MI6 building. So with a cinema camera and a cinema lens, I should look like James Bond right now. Do I? I mean, I'm probably out of focus because it's an 85mm stopped down to 1.5. But I'm not important. The important thing is the building. How does it look? If you saw this shot, if I get out of the way, if you saw that shot, does that look like it belongs in a James Bond movie? And now this is the cheap lens, the cheap photography lens. Do I suddenly look like a tourist? Would this one be okay in a movie? Or does it look more like something you'd see in a documentary? I had a look at both clips, and the photography one, the cheap one, did look pretty good. They both look good. There was a difference in exposure because of the T-stop and f-stop differences. One was at T1.5, the other one was at f1.8. But taking a look really closely again at the budget lens, it does seem to love that purple fringing, whereas the cinema lens is giving more true to life colours, the same as what I can see with my eyes. Those lights on the building are more greenish. One of the reasons you would buy a set of cinema lenses is because the entire set should have that same physical size throughout, so you can swap them over on a rig without having to make any other adjustments. And then they should also all have the same look to them. At the moment I'm filming on the Sigma 10-20. It's the cheapest lens I own, and it's not great. It goes to f4 at the most, and it just seems to reject light and detail. However, it can work well if you get the lighting right with it and the framing. You just have to work a bit harder to get it to look good. Yeah, that was definitely the noise of an American werewolf in London. How's my key light? Is that good? We're going to carry on with a clash of the 85mm. We're going to do it in an area with more purple and green lighting to exaggerate any fringing, make it easier to see. Let me know if you see any weird aberrations, especially ones that look like werewolves. I think I'm in pretty much darkness, but behind me, Buckingham Palace. I get around a bit, don't I? So how does that look? We've got the photography lens on, the cheap photography lens, I should say. Really, I wanted to put the telephoto lens on as well to test in this sort of lighting, but you know, at 200mm, we'd be probably looking through one of those windows, which we don't really want to do. We don't want to see the king with his robes down. You know, we can go to the Tower of London to see the crown jewels. Speaking of, we are now at the Tower of London. Okay, let's jump straight into what is often classed as the gold standard for cinema lenses, used in a lot of the biggest movies ever made. The colours look good on all the stonework, plenty of detail as expected. So then if we switch over to the photography lens, the budget photography lens, firstly I'm noticing a difference in the field of view. Despite both being 100mm, we could probably guess which one is more accurate. The colour is taking quite a big hit as well. Lots more magenta, less detail, although it does seem to maintain its sharpness right to the edge of the frame, which is something that cheaper lenses tend to fail on usually. So it is good value for money in terms of the sharpness edge to edge. The cinema lens is living up to its name. It's smoother, it has that filmic quality, it's less about sharpness and more about the detail and colours. This is really what you pay for on these lenses. It's not just a case of paying for the brand name. Both of the lenses are at their widest aperture, ISO 3200 on the budget lens, and then 1400 on the cinema lens to try and compensate for the exposure difference. So in theory, the exposure should be roughly the same, but the cinema lens is still giving a brighter exposure. So it shows that these lenses don't waste any light. They let the whole portion of that light hit the camera sensor, whereas the budget lens seems to be losing light somewhere in the housing, making it look more similar to a 2.8 in my opinion. How ridiculous is this? I walked all this way. You'd think I'd just get the underground or something like that. But then it does get quite busy and I'm carrying quite a lot of stuff, so probably easier to walk. At least it's quiet here. Good, nice view. There's the where is it? The Shard up there. This is the 28mm Sigma, in case you're wondering. If you liked the image that it's producing. There seems to be quite a lot of flaring coming off the lights. That might be something that you like, you know, the character of the lens, or it might be something you hate. Yeah. Don't ever try vlogging on the cinema camera whilst carrying this much equipment through the centre of London on a tight lens. And just to address the functionality a bit, the manual focus on the cinema lens is very nice to use. It's like a dream the way it glides as you turn it. Trying to do that on a cheaper lens is often like trying to drive a rigid lorry without power steering. We are back on the 28mm EF prime lens, looking down at Leicester Square through an additional layer of glass in what is very much a very handheld style, what you might use when you're vlogging or on your travels. So let's swap the lens over now to the RF 15-35 and set it to 28mm, same as this, and see if you can spot the difference in this very guerrilla style of shooting. Notice the difference, or is the extra layer of glass, handheld movement and random lighting hiding any imperfections the lens might have? There we go, back on a tripod now. It's a lot easier. Is that a good shot? Big Ben, the London Eye? I don't know, don't care now. I've been walking a long time and it's quite late, so I'm going to do the last two tests. And lastly, we're on the RF 15-35 at 18mm. Looks pretty good. I've not lit any of this. This is just the natural lighting from the computer and everything like that. Actually, there's like an LED light down there, but I haven't set that up for lighting or anything. So this is just the natural environment. And this is the Sigma lens. I've set it to 18mm and I can still see the vignetting around the edge because the lens doesn't cover the width of the sensor. Maybe that's something you like. I've had to put the ISO up to 3200 on this one to account for the f-stop difference between this and the RF lens. We're on 5.6 at the moment. So this is a big difference, I think, from the RF, you know, this thing that I had. Final thoughts, as you can see, lighting and composition has way more of an effect on how your image looks than, you know, just the lens on its own. And if you're going for a stylized look, a lot of this goes out the window anyway. With the higher premium priced lenses, you do get better colors and transitions between those colors, a more pleasing image overall, I would say, with less sort of artifacts and aberrations around the edges. But unless you're really punching in and looking for it, you're probably not going to notice anyway. So a lot of what you're paying for is the ease of use with that more expensive equipment. But if your budget doesn't stretch to it, don't worry about it. Just make what you want to make.